Hello from Columbus, Ohio. I'm Scott Foltz alongside Jason Dye. Those stories plus the Cyclones blow into Ames, the Huskies head to the Big House, and our game of the week is a Rose Bowl quality matchup.
All that coming up after this. You're watching Sports Talk on CFC, so stick around.
We begin with a look at last week's games and how close Jason's predictions were. Last week's game of the week, the defending Big Ten champions took on a Minnesota team that showed up to play. What were some key takeaways from both teams in that game?
Well, I got to give credit where credit's due. Minnesota came to play. Mo Abraham for Minnesota, unfortunately, he's out for the rest of the year, but really gave Buckeyes the fits as far as Ohio State on the defensive side of the ball. Ohio State really turned it up in the second half on offense. So, yeah, I honestly thought it'd be a little closer in my prediction, but obviously it wasn't.
Well, we were watching the game and it was a little iffy, and you said the Buckeyes would pull away in the third quarter. And what happened?
The Buckeyes pulled away in the third quarter. That is true. Stroud got settled down after. Golly, Minnesota was in his head.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely in his head. Defense looked like they settled in a little bit. Big strip sack from Zach Harrison, and Haskell Garrett goes ahead and takes it into the end zone. So, and like I said, and also the Buckeye running game decided to really wake up. It was just an exciting game to watch in the second half.
It was. Now, the other Big Ten battle saw Penn State take on Wisconsin. You had the Badgers 24-17, but this one went the other way.
It did, and hats off to Penn State. They went into Camp Randall and won a game, and that's not an easy thing to do. So, obviously, a little bit of defense played part there, but obviously, hey, Penn State won. It's Big Ten football for you.
And then down at Austin, you picked the Longhorns to win, but the Cajuns didn't quite put up the fight you thought they would.
Yeah, I really thought Louisiana would come with a better fight than that, but obviously Steve Sarkisian's got his team ready to play down there in Texas.
Down to South Florida, now you were 1 point off in your score prediction. 1 point for both teams. Now that was a heck of a game from both Miami and the defending national champs.
Yeah, and Alabama once again came to play. I said defense would be huge in that, and obviously a great outing by their new quarterback Bryce Young, and they were able to shut down De'Aaron King on the Miami side of the ball. So, yeah, Alabama just looking like Alabama.
Yep. Back in the heartland, you did pick the Hawkeyes over Indiana, but the Hoosiers didn't quite live up to your expectations.
No, they did not. I have no idea I didn't think it was going to be that big of a blowout, to be honest with you. But I did say Iowa's secondary was going to come in. They had to play with Indiana's receivers. They were able to pick off Michael Penix Jr. 3 times. Don't know if it's time to hit the panic button yet after week 1 for Indiana, but obviously Hawkeyes, Kirk Ferentz get it done big time.
Out on the West Coast, the Ducks whooped up on Fresno State with a bit wider score gap than you thought there'd be.
Yeah, hey, it was a test of tuna, but honestly, I think that game was a little bit closer, but it's no big deal. I mean, Oregon, they might have been looking ahead a little bit, but to Ohio State this week, but hey, they got the job done.
And on the East Coast, you picked Georgia in a much higher scoring, much closer game from both teams. You called it 42-38 and ended up being 10-3. What happened there?
Defense showed up, offense did not. I seriously thought Kirby Smart and Dabo would figure out how to move their offense against the opposing defenses. Obviously, there might be some questions. I didn't get a chance to really watch that game, but it looks like defensively they've got their teams ready to play. So it'll be interesting to see here in the next few weeks how their offenses start to click.
This week opens with the battle for the Cy-Hawk Trophy as Iowa State visits Iowa in the 68th meeting between these two teams. The Hawkeyes lead the series 45-22. They have the longest win streak at 15 games and the current win streak at 5. Is there any reason to think that will change this weekend?
I don't think so. Iowa, I think coming off last week's win at Indiana, defense stepped up obviously last week, and I have no no doubts that they're going to do it again this week against a very stale Iowa State offense. Hawkeyes are obviously still looking for a little bit more in the passing game. They might be able to establish something this week. And going back to Iowa State, they were struggling last week in last week's game. Their quarterback was decent with no turnovers, but they expect to beat Iowa this week. Then they've got to step it up.
What do you think it's going to be?
It's a battle. This game's always a battle. I like the Hawkeyes in a defensive battle, 24-20.
All right, close one. The Jayhawks fly to South Carolina's coast to take on the Chanticleers in a rematch of a late game from last year, which saw Coastal Carolina go over Kansas. Will history repeat itself this year?
I definitely think so. Obviously, Coastal Carolina should be able to rip off big chunks on this Kansas run defense. It's also another big moment for the Coastal Carolina team to play a Power 5 team. On the Kansas side, is this a spark Kansas needed to beat Coastal Carolina after last week? They're going to come out inspired, but I'm not really sure it's to get them past a ranked team.
How do you think this one's going to go?
I think Kansas comes out inspired, but I just really think Coastal Carolina too much for the upbeat Jayhawks, 40-17.
Michigan hosts a winless Washington Husky team in a Big Ten Pac-12 contest. Now, even though the Huskies lost to Montana last week, their defense only allowed 250 yards. Can Michigan's offense overcome that and stay unbeaten for a second week in a row?
Boy, oh boy, don't let that Montana win over Washington really go kind of overlooked here. University of Washington, they have better players than what was presented in week one. Not exactly looking to push desperation mode after a loss to Montana. Now, don't get me wrong; they shouldn't have lost to Montana. I honestly think the Washington defense could give McNamara a very rough time. On the Michigan side of the ball, they lost their best wide receiver in Bell. It hurts this offense because you don't really know if they have a run game yet. Is another guy going to step up for Cade McNamara? We really don't know. You never know what Jim Harbaugh's got up his sleeve, though. The running game definitely needs to step up, and you need to see that if you're a Michigan fan.
How do you think this one goes?
Well, I think Washington comes out, plays a little bit better, but I'm going to give the edge to Harbaugh. Michigan wins 24-20.
And finally, our game of the week sees the defending Big Ten champion Ohio State Buckeyes face the defending Pac-12 champion Oregon Ducks in what would have been a Rose Bowl game on any given New Year. This is the game that everyone's talking about this week, and most people think that these two teams will be each other's toughest test all season. Which champion will stand tall when this one's over?
Well, Oregon has the talent and the speed to win this game, and I'm telling you right now, you cannot, if you're this Ohio State secondary, you cannot let one of their receivers get behind you because they'll be gone in a flash. But with that, Oregon has got to execute. Even though they beat Fresno State, they really could have done a lot better, and that just comes down to execution. And the Ducks also have to do what Minnesota couldn't do to Ohio State last week, and that's get to C.J. Stroud. The Buckeyes did not let not one sack, no yards for loss really last week. And then on the Ohio State side of the ball, the Buckeye offensive line is underrated in my opinion. We saw that it started to take over in that third quarter against Minnesota. Ohio State also has that explosive punch at wide receiver and running back, Olave and Wilson, and Henderson and Williams. But the question I got is, what happened to Teague after the first series? Really didn't see any more of Master Teague. They might have been holding him off. Ryan Day might have been holding him off a little bit for this Oregon game. Obviously, you want everybody in this game.
Mm-hmm.
And then questions on the Ohio State defensive side. Are they ready for the speed of Oregon? Now, they were getting beat a little bit in the secondary last week. Obviously had some troubles with Mo Ibrahim last week from Minnesota. And how do you slow them down? You have to that defensive line has got to go in the backfield of Oregon and absolutely disrupt plays. You do that, you throw off Oregon's timing because they've got their time set with their speed. You've got to be able to get back there, and you've got to hit them.
So who's staying 1-0 after this one?
I really think this one goes. Oregon gets ahead a little early, but I really think the stars of the show are going to be the Ohio State offense and defensive linemen, and I like Ohio State 40-17.
All right. Before we go, we'll take a look at this week's top 10 as listed in the AP poll. At number 1, Alabama, the only team that didn't move from last week. Now, obviously, Bama just keeps on trucking, don't they?
They do, and it's amazing. It just seems like Nick Saban can take anybody that he feels is worth it, and he just molds them into. He takes nobodies and puts them into somebodies. It's just like they just keep reloading. It's kind of neat to see. It really is.
The Bulldogs moved up 3 spots following their victory over Clemson. So the question is, was it really an upset after all?
Yes, I do think it was. I mean, obviously, you've got, in order to get to the top, you got to beat those above you, and Georgia did. They just took care of business. I mean, that pick 6 there at the end of the game really just sealed it for them. So, yeah.
At number 3, the Buckeyes move up 1 spot after their victory over Minnesota. But give credit where credit's due in that loss. Minnesota showed up to play.
They really did, and I think that's why Ohio State got bumped up to 3, and I think nationally, on the national stage, Minnesota's getting a lot of respect even in that loss. But still, you got to beat who you're supposed to beat. Ohio State takes care of business, moves up.
Oklahoma drops 2 spots after last week to number 4. Now, is the Sooners' defense really this bad, or was this just a one-off?
I would hope that this is a one-off, but you cannot give up 35 points to Tulane. And we've seen Big 12 defenses suspect, but here recent years since Lincoln Riley took over for Bob Stoops, you haven't seen these defenses play all that bad. But Big 12 defenses are streaky, and that's a big and I hate to say it that way, but it's really a big statement, but it's true. And you cannot give up 35 to Tulane and expect to stay up there in the polls. You've got to take care of business.
Texas A&M breaks into the top 5, which will make one of our viewers in the nation's capital very happy.
Aggies piled up almost 600 yards of offense in a 41-10 route. They took care of it. Like I said, it's an ongoing thing. Take care of business, and everything else will take care of itself.
Clemson drops 3 spots after their loss to Georgia, and Dabo Swinney had only won 3 of his last 6 games. Are there low times, and will they rebound?
Man, it's a very uncertain thing in Death Valley right now, and the only thing I can say is, if Dabo is great as he's proven in the past, you got to start looking past this. You've got a pretty decent schedule going in the ACC. No real challengers in the ACC, maybe other than Virginia Tech, North Carolina. But I just think now's the time to get the ball rolling again. So hopefully we'll see them in a better spotlight.
Moving up 1 to number 7, Cincinnati Bearcats. Now, Coach Luke Fickell, he's showing why his team's in the top 10.
Absolutely, and you just see this Cincinnati team week in, week out. They put in the work. They're getting the wins, and now that they've, I think they just officially put in their application to get into the Big 12. Look out, Big 12. Coach Fick comes to play, and he plays for keeps. So
Yes, he does.
this man will keep his team prepared. They're hardworking. We know Coach Fick from Ohio State, so I would assume that that's going to be his body of work going into the Big 12.
At number 8, the Irish move up 1 spot after their overtime win over Florida State. You had some thoughts on this game as you were watching it.
I was. First of all, hats off to Florida State. They're playing inspired. The Florida State campus, well, as we all know, Bobby Bowden passed away. They're playing for that. There's a bunch of energy. You want to go out. You want to make your school proud. You want to beat Notre Dame, and it was some great things. But Brian Kelly found a way to get it done in overtime. Great game, and I'm looking forward. Maybe this is the spark Florida State needed. Maybe start rise back to power again.
And be the team they once were, absolutely. Yeah. At number 9, Iowa State Cyclones dropped 2 spots even though they won last week. What's happening there?
First game jitters, not really taking your opponent seriously, but you've got to beat the teams lesser than you. You cannot go if you're supposed to be beating these teams 35-10 or 40-10 or whatever. 16-10 ain't going to get it done if you want to go up in the rankings. And I think anybody that has anything to do with these polls on a national scale. They're taking notice of that early, and I think they're making a statement right now. And now with them going and playing Iowa, you got to beat Iowa, because if you don't, you're dropping out of that top 10 pretty obviously. So.
Speaking of Iowa, that brings us to our number 10 spot. The team with the biggest move, the Hawkeyes, move up 8 spots after they ran over Indiana last week.
Yeah, and there again, Iowa takes care of business. Indiana does not. I think if this would have been a closer game, you wouldn't have seen that big jump for Iowa. But yeah, I mean, take care of business, and business will take care of itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's our show for this week. We'll see you next time for more predictions and analysis right here on Sports Talk.